Thanks for stopping by Big Top Gaming. My name's Brian, and I'm here today to talk to you about Warmachine. So for the people who are here for my Ice and Fire content, don't feel like the Ice and Fire content's going to go away or anything like that. I still don't think I'm 100% to keep consistent with everything that I come out. You know, I used to upload 2 to 3 videos a week, and now it's kind of turning into one. So if there's a fall off in Ice and Fire content, it's more so because I just haven't kind of bounced back from surgery just yet. But I did want to try and work in some other things that I've been passionate about. So don't feel like Warmachine's just going to take over the channel or something. I actually have a Dothraki Screamer painting tutorial sitting in the hopper that just needs some more editing before it goes out. For the Warmachine players who are here for Warmachine content, the format that I follow from Ice and Fire I want to kind of apply to Warmachine, where I talk about a list and the components that go into it and what it does and what my expected outcome is for that list. And then I put it to the test in a battle report, and I do I guess it's common in the Warmachine world to see the gameplay sped up and then the commentary by the two players going over that to talk more about the tactical side of things. So that's the format that I follow. So if you're used to that and you like that kind of stuff, then you'll feel home right here. I also do painting tutorials as well that center around new releases or things that I happen to be playing at the time. So if you have any requests or suggestions for things you'd want to see on here, whether it's painting or otherwise, feel free to leave them in the comments below. I'd also ask that you subscribe to the channel and hit the notification button for me, because I upload videos to YouTube and then there's about a 2-day lag that happens before I get around to promoting them through either the Big Top Gaming Facebook page or the Facebook pages that they pertain to. And if you do that, then you'll just get notified whenever I upload a video, so you can watch it right away without having to wait for me to go through and throw stuff up there. So a little bit about me and my Warmachine history. I started about mid-Mark II, and I carried myself all the way up through just before Oblivion and the Infernals hit, and in that time I had played every faction that is available, and but my core kind of centers around Trolls and Khador, like any typical Wisconsinite would, or Midwesterner probably. But then when that Oblivion era kind of started happening, I dodged out for a while and started pursuing other passions in wargaming, and recently I've kind of gotten that passion restoked, and I wanted to just kind of throw some Warmachine stuff up here because I enjoy making the videos. It's like another hobby for me. So when around that Mark II era, one of my favorite lists to play was Charge of the Horse Lords. I believe that's what it was called, and it was Vlad 3's theme force. And you could take a lot of cool tools because Vlad 3 was the kind of caster who could turn certain things up depending on the situation that he needed to do, which was really my favorite way to play, was to have answers for just about everything and then try and turn those up a little bit. You could take Greylord Outriders and Ironfang Ulans, and you'd have two very different units that answer different things, and Vlad could make those units do a little bit more depending on what he put on them. But when Mark III came around, that theme force kind of faded into oblivion. You kind of had to pick between one or the other. You know, you could either take Wolves of Winter or Legion of Steel. So for me, Vlad III kind of got shelved. I maybe played him one more time just to check him out in Legion of Steel, but it just didn't work for me. So when I saw that Warriors of the Old Faith was a theme list that kind of got put out, you know, I got really interested in it, and that's really one of the things that pulled me back in, was that I could, you know, dust Vlad 3 off and get some cool stuff going on with that. So that's what we're going to talk about today, is Warriors of the Old Faith built from a Vlad 3 perspective. Now this can be taken in a Khador pairing or a Menoth pairing. Just it depends on what you want your other list to be doing, because the things that I talk about with the Khador side are really going to be the same as the Menoth one. It's just where it plugs in with you. So the first thing I'm going to touch on is Vlad 3 himself, and then we'll kind of build from there. But I guess first I should talk about the theme itself and just give a brief overview of it. So this is a marriage between Menoth and Khador, and the first theme benefit for this one is that all models are Khador and Menoth models, so you don't have to worry about, you know, you get all that friendly faction business going on. The second benefit for the list is that all your cavalry gets line breaker, and that's a pretty big deal for this one. Some of the models we'll be taking have like critical effects on their mounts, so getting the third die on impact attacks really helps. The other good thing about it is that you can now get a little bit more fast and loose with your impact attacks, because you don't have to worry about getting chunked up on something that's like defense 14 with a coin toss or something. You can just kind of get a more guarantee that you're going to get through those, so you don't have to get chunked up on those sticky models with your big heavy cav. The last benefit for this one, which I think is probably one of the best for the theme force, is re-rolling to go first. And the reason why I say that is because the list is going to be very fast, and Vlad 3 is definitely going to make sure that that is the case. So if you get turn 1, you can put a lot of pressure on your opponent, and a lot of us, when it comes to playing Warmachine, we're used to unpacking our list on turn 1. It's kind of robotic, you know? So taking that comfort zone, that bubble of having, you know, good clock management away from your opponent is really good for this list. Your opponent has to make a lot of interesting decisions on turn 1 because they can't just unpack how they normally would, since your threat ranges are so far and you have a lot that's really, you know, putting their pieces under pressure, and you're threatening shutting them out of the scenario. So there's a lot of benefits to getting the first turn with this list. It goes without saying that it doesn't mean that this list can't play on the second turn. You just get to be a little bit more careful with how you do things, and then can start exerting that quick speed force on like turn 3, turn 2 maybe. But so for Vlad, that's kind of the overview of the theme force. For Vlad 3 specifically, when you look at him, at least on the front of his card, he seems like a pretty defensive caster. He's got 15-17 for defense and armor, and he's got 7 focus, so he can do what he wants to and still camp a little bit. So it makes it seem like he wants to kind of get in the business and do stuff, especially since he's got 2 melee weapons, technically 3 if you count his mount. And when you look at the back of that front card, or that first card, Blood Quenched can kind of put you into a false sense of thinking that he needs to be that far forward, or that he wants to, because you want to keep getting those Blood Quenched bonuses each turn. The thing about Blood Quenched is that Vlad is still vulnerable. If you lose your caster, you lose the game. So if you get too comfortable with putting Vlad up there, or if your opponent tries to bait you out into a really unfortunate scenario with giving you a bunch of guys to get Blood Quenched bonuses off of, there's a good chance that it's not going to pan out well for you, and you'll lose the game because your opponent's just too worried about the force that your list is putting forward. So I like to use Blood Quenched as more of like a mid-game or late-game tool when I'm kind of running out of things to do stuff with. Then Vlad can get in there and actually do work with it and stay relatively safe, because a lot of the things that you would be afraid of getting to your caster might be their effectiveness might be lowered, or you're able to clear an area so you don't have to worry about it, and your opponent's kind of forgot about that little tool in your pocket. So the weapons that he has aren't a whole lot to write home about. He's got a POW 12 spear that goes 14 on the charge, but the Huntsman's kind of cool in that it's a POW 13 weapon that has chain, or it's a POW 13 chain weapon, so that can do a lot of work with those too. So don't think of Vlad as a frontline commander. He kind of likes to let the army do their thing, and then he likes to regroup from there, especially since a lot of his buffs really want him to be more central. He does have Repo 3 like any other heavy cav would, and that can get him, make sure that he gets somewhere to put something out or apply a buff and then kind of get back into safety. He also has Relentless Charge, so he doesn't get gummed up on terrain as much as you think or as much as he would without it. It's definitely a good tool to use. In terms of Vlad's spell list, one of the first things that he brings is Dash. So this ends up giving all your cavalry +1 speed, and that's important distinction between speed and movement, because now your speed 7 cavalry is running up 18 inches on turn, or 16 inches on turn 1, or your speed 8 cav is running 18 inches on turn 1. I had all the math screwed up in my head for a minute. But the other benefit to this, other than just getting this massive speed buff, is that all those models get, or all those warrior models get parry as well. So for Cav, that's really nice, since you can ignore kind of the spread out jams that your opponent might put out if they've got a bunch of reach infantry. You don't have to worry about taking all those free strikes as you're getting into really critical spots. And we are bringing 2 flying models in this list, so that's a huge benefit for them, in that they can just kind of go right over an entire mob of models and not have to worry about taking any damage. And with that extra speed, they'll be able to make sure that they've got a good landing spot, and your opponent might not see that coming, especially from a Khador player, because we're not usually the faction that brings in a lot of tricks. And I feel like this is definitely a trick that you can unpack on an unsuspecting opponent. The other big spell that Vlad brings, which is definitely going to be out every game, is Hand of Fate. And there's a lot of good places to put this, but we're mostly concentrating it on units in our battle group. And with that reposition and speed 8 on Vlad, we can make sure he gets to where he needs to put it out. Another one that Vlad has is Flashing Blade. Now, I'm pretty sure this is the way it works, but if I'm wrong, post in the comments below so I can start playing it right. But Flashing Blade, even though it lets you do simultaneous attacks against everything with the melee range of the weapon that you choose, I believe that every single model that you kill ends up adding to the Blood Quenched bonus, because it kind of states that you get the bonus for each model that you've destroyed with a melee attack. So again, I could be wrong on that one. Things with simultaneous attacks and bonuses or benefits from it get a little wonky for me still. I don't think I ever really had that down even back when I was playing in ye old Mark II days, which I won't reflect on that much. Another spell that Vlad has that's really important for him is Infernal Machine. It gives his Warjacks +2 speed, again another really important distinction between speed and movement, and then Murderous. So this allows his one part of his battle group to keep up with the rest of the army and have some really good melee presence with getting boosted or additional die on living models. Definitely one that you want to get out early so you can project that force. Another one that Vlad has is the Rubber Stamp Khador Nuke of Razorwind. This is the spell you kind of want to unpack when it's going to help win you the game. You really aren't going to be throwing it out just for, shits and giggles. It's just a nice tool to have, not something that you're going to rely on a whole bunch. The last spell that Vlad brings with him is Wind Wall, and this is a really good one for him in that you can make yourself immune to that shooting that's not magical, and with the 3-inch bubble, that gives you enough space to put an entire unit of cavalry around you, and then maybe a couple solos or another large base solo in back of him. So Vlad can kind of escort a really scary unit up, and you don't have to worry about those guns hurting you so much because you've got the wind wall protection. Vlad 3's feat is a little bit more on the screwball-y side. I think a lot of people discount it because it doesn't look that great on paper, but it really is nice in practice. So essentially all cavalry models and his battle group get sprint and sidestep. So this doesn't sound like a big deal when you think about a lot of the infantry that we take either has a lance or already has sidestep on it, but the ability to charge forward, to hit at lance with max range and then pop back a couple inches and then sprint away is a really big deal. It lets you get that alpha twice. So that's one of the ways that you can utilize Vlad 3's feat, is to charge up your 14-inch threat staying at max reach. You smash them with the lance, then you back up with sidestep, and then you end up backing up another 9 inches with sprint from if you have dash up. Another way to use this if your opponent's not going to give you that great of an initial contact is to use this kind of in the mid game when you need your resources have kind of dwindled a little bit because you do have a lot of eggs in one basket with this list, and you say, well, I need to do work with this cavalry unit, but I also need to get back in the zone once that work has been done. So sometimes reposition 3 doesn't really do that for you. So using that feat to get that really nice charge with dash, hit things, ignore any free strikes that you would have taken from things you didn't kill, and then get back into your zones to be able to score it and reestablish that line again is really good for Vlad. And I think that is definitely a way that people don't look at when they think about Vlad 3's feat, is that it does have mid-game applicability. It's not just the first turn smash and run. So for this list, I'm going to post it on the side here so you can see it in its entirety. But the first thing we're reaching for with Vlad 3 is Adjudicator. And I know that a lot of people are probably groaning right now because the double Hand of Fate thing is really the low-hanging fruit here. But in Vlad 3's list, it's a really big deal for him. It's not just a piece that we're playing because it's extremely powerful. It's because the rest of the list, as you see, is really contained into these small packages. So we don't have a lot of ways to influence the table in a wide fashion. We kind of go after these one spots with a lot of hefty models, and then they're kind of there, unless they get out and kind of wrap around a different way. But the Adjudicator, especially with Infernal Machine, we're talking about running 14 inches on turn 1, and then from that, you're up 21 inches on the table now with your deployment if you've gone first. You're affecting almost the entire table with his guns at that point, And it's really hard for your opponent to have to figure out what they want to do. If they decide to sit back and turtle for a little while so that they can try and deny you that turn 1 alpha, or that you get the alpha, they end up taking a lot of gunshots from the Judicator, and between battle and Hand of Fate, they're taking a ton of damage. I think my best one so far was that I took a Famorite Archon down to 1 wound on just blast damage with 2 shots. So you can get a lot of work out of those blasts. Feel free to throw them around and see what happens. They're definitely a valuable thing. Don't discount them ever. The other thing about the Judicator is that, of course, it's going to take that Hand of Fate real well. So turn 1 probably is going to be getting Infernal Machine out and then throwing Hand of Fate where you need it, which is usually going to be the Judicator. So he's a really important piece to this. If it's something you don't want to do, Templars and Inditers aren't bad pieces to put into the Vlad list. The Templar's kind of cute because it's a really survivable jack. With Infernal Machine, it's got a pretty decent threat on it. And then on feat turn, when you have Sidestep and Beatback all working together with Murderous, you can kind of get him into places where people wouldn't have seen him getting normally, and then you would have a full stack to maybe go in on a caster or something. It he can be quite a surprising piece with Sidestep kind of glued onto him. So Templars are not bad. Inditers, they've just got 2 initials that are pretty decent, and they're survivable jacks, so that's kind of why I've included them. But really, the world's your oyster when it comes to that. If you want to try and lean into those things, there's plenty of other options that are available for you. For solos, we're grabbing those 2 Menite Archons because it's one of the big bonuses for this list. Since everything's Protectorate and Khador models, we don't have to worry about that eating up some kind of weird mercenary slot. We just get to have 2 Menite Archons with no real downfalls at all. Vlad can put Hand of Fate on him if he needs to. They end up benefiting from dash. And the only real thing that you need to watch out for with these guys is the Fuel for the Flames ability. We don't have a whole lot of ways to make that better for ourselves other than the Judicator sprays, but the other thing to remember is that Fuel for the Flames affects your opponent's fire damage rolls too, so you don't want to put that Archon kind of hugging a bunch of your cavalry, because that could make things a lot easier for your opponent to take them out. So it's better to kind of get him off on his own if you're looking at something like a Blockader or another Menoth player, maybe even some random Legion player who brings Ravagors. The other things that we bring for solos, I have Dart and Vilman and the Hermit of Henchhold. The Hermit of Henchhold's kind of hard to not take as a requisition. He just does so much. He's got a damage debuff. We do have a couple models that aren't going to be reliably hitting a lot of their Razor Winds or Arcane Bolts, so sometimes telemetry can just get you out of a bad situation if you've kind of got yourself pushed against a corner. But ignoring that damage roll on your Judicator or Vlad is another really great thing for him too. So I feel like the Hermit's inclusion kind of goes without saying. There's not much I need to talk about with him. It's just a good solid piece, and I don't mind chunking away requisition for it. Darton Vilman, though, he's just there's a lot of the solos in this list want to do work, and Darton isn't a slouch for any of that. I mean, he's a Mat 9 Weapon Master that's speed 6, goes up to 7 with dash. And what I really want him for, though, is that 8 wounds and stone and mortar stance. I can get him on one of our flags or try and get him into an enemy flag, and he's a really hard piece to remove. So having him in this list ends up giving us a nice scoring piece that we don't have to worry about losing in terms of support, because we did bring the requisition of 2 vassals of Menoth, and that's really so Vlad can kind of have the weight of the Judicator lifted off his shoulders. He doesn't ever need to fuel it. With those 2 vassals, we can just power him up right away and get him going. But the vassals aren't really going to help us with scoring a whole bunch unless things get really dire, because they're going to be really close to that Judicator the whole game, and they want to be safe because I don't want to have to start putting Vlad's focus onto that Judicator. So Darton Vilman is really just a nice solid model that's going to kind of hold down an area or even contest a zone when he needs to. In terms of units, we're kind of bringing that mandatory min unit of Choir to get battle out on the Judicator. Now, as a Khador player, it was difficult for me to learn at first that there are other modes to the Choir. I knew they were there, but I just didn't use them. I just kind of looked at them like battle bots, right? So Passage is something that you definitely want to keep in your mind when it comes to that. I was facing down 2 Stormstriders, and 2 turns in a row I forgot to Passage, and that was a real bummer for that Judicator. So between Wind Wall and Passage on the Judicator, you can get a lot of units that are really immune to shooting for the most part, and your opponent's going to have to make some more rough choices because you can just decide to not give them the other unit that's kind of hanging out there, and that's just another way to get your stuff up the table without having too many problems with it. Another unit we're bringing are Initiates of the Order of the Wall. They're a nice little small unit that can get into zones to score them. They also have it's 3 shield guards in that package that are quite survivable on their own when they clump up. And they do some work in melee if they need to, so they're like a nice little pocket piece that you have that you can unpack late game. This isn't a unit that I'm going to have babysitting a cavalry unit. I'll probably put it on something like making sure it's close to a Menite Archon to take some boostable shots from him, and definitely making sure that they're by Vlad and the Judicator so that I don't have to worry about any kind of debilitating shots coming in at them, like a rush shot or a blind shot. The other thing that I'm bringing is 2 heavy cav units, or heavy cav units, and that would be the Vengers and the Iron Fang Ulans. Now when you look at these two on paper, their stats are pretty comparable. The Ulans look like they're a little bit more forceful, like on the get-go. They don't really need a whole lot of help to do anything. Their POW's a little bit higher on the onset, and they can kind of clump up to get a nice armor bonus that's kind of on demand and not up to your opponent giving it to you. So they're a little bit survivable in that early part of the game. The big one for them is having Relentless Charge, and they do have 2 sources of knockdown, one on their mount and one on their blasting pike. When you look over at the Vengers, they really need your opponent's interaction to get some of their bonuses with Battle Driven. Other than that, it's the only way they can get Pathfinder in this list, so it's good to have a unit that is able to mitigate terrain, while you have this one over here that can only do it situationally. This way your opponent can't shut that unit out just by avoiding it and putting terrain between you and some juicy pieces of your opponent's army. The reason to bring Vengers, though, is that they do get more survivable than Iron Fangs when they get battle driven. They also hit a lot harder, well, just a little bit harder than Ulans do, but the big one is that they have Blessed and Magical on their lances, so we don't have to like tech for that at all if we come across incorporeal things, or if our opponent's got a big like armor buff or defense buff that they're keeping out. We can just kind of mitigate that with the Vengers. So I think I've seen a lot of lists take 2 of one or 2 of the other, but I really like the 2 working in concert together. And those are more units or more targets for Hand of Fate. You might want to be juggling that between the Judicator and that Cavalry because they can hit pretty hard too. Other than that, when I play this list, the things that I like to avoid are scenarios like King of the Hill, because the 2 spread out box scenarios, or box zones, the square zones, I need to commit my Judicator to one side or the other, and it's tough for me to want to do that because then my opponent can take the things that the Judicator wants to be shooting into and kind of put them far away so that the Judicator might not have the easiest time getting to them. So with that scenario, I try to rely on my second list unless I'm really just kind of going in for a late game assassination by attritioning out my opponent. We also only have that 1 circle zone in the middle, so our cavalry units, I like to kind of run them on the flanks a little bit, not far on the flanks. I still like to make sure that the army's pretty cohesive and put together. Not so much a brick, but I want to make sure I'm getting the most out of dash. And with this one, I don't want them so close to one another that they're all still fighting over the same zone. It kind of takes away some of the benefits that I get from being able to play so far out on the sides. You can kind of funnel your opponent into the middle, and that turns into a shooting gallery for the Judicator as things go on. So right now I pair this list with Old Witch 2 and Wolves of Winter. I think that Vlad 3 going into like maybe a large battle group might be a little bit harder for him, whereas it's a little bit easier for Old Witch. If there's a lot of oppressive shooting coming from my opponent, something like Kara Sloan, then I think Old Witch is good for that one too. Vlad can get there, but he's still going to take a lot of heavy casualties on the way in. So that's just my theory for right now with those. And I do have two heavy Warjacks in that list, so it makes it so that those King of the Hill zones they can just kind of go into, and the Doom Reavers go wherever, because whatever the Doom Reavers can do, the Warjacks, they don't have to worry about doing any more heavy lifting because they've kind of got that for them between that and Curse of Shadows. So let me know what you think about Warriors of the Old Faith. How are you working with it from a Menoth perspective? Do you have any things in your list that are different from mine? I know one of the things that people do a lot right now is kind of make this super solo team with a bunch of Dragoons. The only reason why I stay away from that with this list is because Vlad kind of likes buffing units with Hand of Fate, and I think with the solos it just doesn't work so well for him. It gets a little choppy. So not to say that you can't do it, it's just not something that I really like to do. I always thought Vlad of more of a cool toolbox caster, so I like to have things that I can, put toolboxy things on, or treat them as a tool instead of just like a super solo that kind of runs forward and does what it does. Otherwise, if you have any other suggestions on these videos, I know it's kind of haphazard, but this is my first one, so whatever happens here, if there's something that's wonky, I'm always looking to improve because I want to make sure you enjoy this content too. It's just not me screaming into the void here or something. One of the things that I'm really happy about with this list right now is that I've never really liked the aesthetic of Khador, or of Menoth models. I almost did the worst thing ever and said Khador models were ugly. But I don't like Menoth models, so I'm converting all of the Menoth models to look more Khador-like, and I'll leave a few pictures in here for you to check those out. But it's been a really fun adventure so far, and I do look forward to making more of these videos, and keep an eye out for the battle report that I'll have with Warriors of the Old Faith going into something.